Cool cats and kittens, it's Mr. Merson, your English teacher. I want to talk to you today about a poem. Before I do, I want to talk about attendance. It's crazy. They sent me 3 different links to send to you guys yesterday. I think they're still figuring it out. Please don't stress about whether or not you'll get counted present. Just when you see one of those sign-in links, please use it, sign in, try your best. But don't stress about it. I'm sure they'll get it worked out the next day or two. But as long as you're logging into your Google Classrooms and you're doing your work and you're doing your assignments, you're going to be fine. Just please try to sign in when you can. Don't stress about it. Don't stress about anything. If they tell me some crazy stuff about how you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, I will go in there myself and change those records myself and fight for you, because I don't want you to stress about it now. Let's stress about it later if we need to, but I bet we won't. Today's poem is Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare, and I'm going to go straight into it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and oft is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declined, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. First thing I want you to note about this poem is that it is a sonnet. It is a Shakespearean sonnet. There's a few things that all Shakespearean sonnets have in common. The first thing that you want to note is that it's got 14 lines. And those 14 lines are divided into like 4 paragraphs, almost like the essays have been having you write. And those paragraphs are groups of lines. 3 quatrains, and quatrains 4 lines that rhyme together, and 1 couplet. Couplet is 2 lines that rhyme together, right? So we have day, temperate, May, date. That's 4 lines, right? And then those 4 lines he's kind of asking, should I compare you to a summer's day? Then we have shines, dim, declines, untrimmed, and then those 4 lines come together to say probably not. And then we have fade, oast, shade, grossed, and that is, because your beauty will last forever. And then the last 2 lines, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. And that's kind of like the conclusion of the poem. He says the reason why your beauty's gonna last forever is because I'm such a great poet and I've written poetry about you. Which is kind of pretentious, and we'll get to that in a second. But I wanted you to see how the Shakespearean sonnets organize their lines and why that number 14 is so important. 4, 4, 4, and 2 is 12. We have kind of a question, an answer, an explanation, and a conclusion in the way that he organizes his poem. The other thing I want you to know about the structure of this poem and most of Shakespeare's poetry is that it is written in something called iambic pentameter. We've talked about iambs before, and iamb is a heartbeat. Penta means 5, meter means line, so iambic pentameter means 5 heartbeats per line. If anybody ever asks you a question about rhythm in poetry in an English class, they are almost certainly going to be asking you about iambic pentameter, because that's like the big one that everybody talks about. Iambic pentameter is kind of like the right angles of poetry. Like, it just shows up everywhere. And you can see it in every line, right? 5 heartbeats per line, that's 10 syllables, right? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And Shakespeare uses this because during the time when he was writing, when people spoke in iambic pentameter, the idea is that they were truly speaking from the heart. That's why in Shakespeare's plays, whenever a character is truly speaking from love, they are speaking, they usually speak in iambic pentameter, right? Right, Romeo is talking about Juliet, and he's thinking about all this deep love that comes from a place of true heart. He's speaking in iambic pentameter. Also, like when kings or religious figures speak in Shakespeare plays, they always speak in iambic pentameter. So you just need to know iambic pentameter, 14 lines separated into 4 sections, to kind of understand sonnets in general. Now this poem is one of my favorites because it shows how much Shakespeare really thinks about himself. The question he asks is, should I compare you to a summer's day? And he says no, because summer days can be too hot, sometimes the sun can go away, and summer's days end. He says, but your beauty won't end, right? I'm going to make sure that death never takes you and that your beauty lasts forever. He says, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and by this he means the poem, and this gives life to thee. Let's look at the third quatrain. So starting with but thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. He says, you're never going to go away because you're going to live in my eternal lines of poetry. And maybe that's right about that, because he wrote this poetry a very long time ago, and here we are in 2020 talking about it. Right? So maybe he wasn't lying when he told this person that they were going to live forever in his poetry, and their beauty would live forever in his poetry. So my question for you today, and discussion question, is, what are your eternal lines? What are the things that are going to let you live forever? When people look back 200, 300 years from now, what are the eternal lines that you are going to be preserved in? What are you writing? What are you creating? What are you leaving behind that will communicate to the world who you were, or who you are? Thank you so much. Please make sure you sign in. Please make sure you respond to this discussion question, and I hope you have a great day.